here's me, Christine Cerna, CFO and co-founder of Nynth Group. We are a 7th subsidiary tech management company that helps independent healthcare practices, particularly pharmacies, expand their business services and optimize administrative as well as procedural workflow through technology, mobility, and innovation. I started my journey in biomedical engineering before transitioning into embryology. So I was a professional baby maker for a bit. I focused on AI for assisted reproductive technology. And I channeled all those experiences into founding with my partner a multidisciplinary startup. I'm an advocate across multiple countries for accessible and affordable healthcare around the world. And I believe in disrupting the healthcare industry through the power of transparency. So we're going to be talking about ageism in tech. And hopefully one of my panelists here can give me like a good definition first.
Sure. I'll hop in there. So like many other forms of discrimination that happen throughout the hiring and work process, ageism is a particular bias against people who are either perceived to be old or young relatively to the rest of the industry. And it's just as damaging as any other form of sort of closed-minded approaches to assessing people on a single metric. When we lose the diversity of age, we lose a perspective across multiple different vectors of thought. So having people that have a broad range of experiences, people who are the farther end of the age spectrum, benefits from having pattern recognition and understanding of trends. And people who are just entering the industry bring in a wealth of new perspectives and new energy. And so both are extremely important to keeping everything moving forward and innovating, while also remembering, hey, there's been some places where maybe we didn't do this great before. And so like, let's try to do that better.
Excellent. Uky, do you have anything to add there?
No, I think that was great. I mean, one of the main things I always look at is, and I like to say this to my team a lot, is know your hunger, right? Know what you're hungry for. Whether you're getting into the marketplace right out of school, or whether you've been in a different industry for 20 plus years and you're like, hey, I want to try something new. I want to try something cool. I hear tech is really awesome if you do the right stuff. How do I do that the right way? But you do that because you start by knowing your hunger, though. How hungry are you to actually get into it, do the basic fundamental steps so that you cover the basics of what you need to know to really start ramping up, scaling, whether you decide to open up your own startup, whether you decide to join a great team like Netflix or Dell or Microsoft. It's really know your hunger, guys. Bottom line.
I feel like tech is a super unique space because it's both inevitable and applicable to literally every single person in the world. You know, so it's funny because kind of the age discrimination in it is so massive, yet it's something that has to be inclusive. You can't kind of like walk away from a you can't really like separate or not include a specific demographic because everyone has to use it, whether they're older. Like tech is made to make things easier for everyone, and as you get older, technically, well, really everyone, you have more responsibility. You kind of need the assistance, and to not include someone based on their age, whether it's older or younger demographic, is just you're missing out on a huge market. So what are some of the pains that you guys experience personally getting into tech? And so let's talk both on like the user side and the person creating the tech.
So I would say for me, I've been in tech for a very long time. And so there's a perception that either I've been around too long or I'm not up to date with current technology. And that's a perception that I think, a lot of older workers struggle with. But I think too, that longer perspective gives me an interesting vantage point of being able to guide people in and help them not make some of the same, I don't want to say mistakes, but like maybe take a shorter path than I did in some places. But the real crucial issue, the thing that I work with most is retention of women in technology. At about the 10-year mark, women tend to leave the profession at a rate twice as high as men. And that's uh, a real bad place, because at the 10 or so year mark, if you haven't made it into the C-suite yet, or if you haven't made it into a director position, you're half again as likely as your male counterpart to make that happen in the next 10 years. And so to try to keep women in the technology profession long enough to help them get into the C-suite and to get into those positions that help, influence and direct companies. And, from a purely financial standpoint, companies with more diverse leadership just genuinely make more money. They are faster to market with their products. They are, they will bring to market 3 to 5 new ideas versus 2 to 6 of the, so like you're going to have more span of market new items, and they're going to come up with more, they're going to be more financially resilient, especially during what we can call our challenging economic times right now. Companies that are more diverse with regard to age specifically tend to weather financial crises without a lot of churn. So for a lot of reasons, it's super important, but also like making sure that you have that balanced perspective, both from the work that you're doing, but also the people that you're building for, whatever we're building for. So specifically at Netflix, we have an initiative called the Silver Screen, where we sent out Chromecast devices and remote controls to households with members 65 plus, and then help them set up Netflix and walk them through that to see where the pain points were, to see where the confusion was, and to specifically reach out to people who might struggle with that technology, but for whom, this is a ready-made, like Netflix is kind of their jam. It should be anyway. And so, helping people, helping us understand what were the barriers, and talking through those sessions were absolutely fascinating, just to hear like the places where people tripped up, but like how excited and super into getting this thing set up for themselves they were. So they don't want to call you at Thanksgiving and ask you how to fix their computer, but that's really the only avenue they have. So we'd like to try to add that helping hand. So thinking about it both from the people that you bring in to work on the project and the people who are going to consume that project, and having that empathy for, people who have not perhaps had the same breadth of technological experience as some of us. I feel like I'm a fortunate straddler of that. Like I've had technology all my life and I've watched it undergo lots of changes, but it's not like I didn't have a computer when I was a kid. So I have that benefit too. How about you, Uky?
If you guys haven't noticed, I am kind of a salesperson at heart. I really am. So I kind of look at it from 2 sides of it. Is right out of school, my gosh, 25 years ago now, right? I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just did some stuff, lived in downtown Chicago. Won't go into details, guys, all right? But for a while, I was kind of just doing my thing. Then I eventually met my wife now, right? And that just caused a catalyst of things where I had to figure out what I wanted to do. So I decided to take my path on the sales side to start. So I said to myself, well, what do I do though? I have zero experience in all this stuff. What do I need to do? What industry should I sell into? Where can I make sure that it's worth my time, right? And how do I make people listen to me? So when you look at that, is again, I think that I started building a very repetitive process in my own mind on first, what do I want to sell? Or what am I going to be passionate about? Is I think more apt term, right? Whether you're a salesperson, engineer, it doesn't matter. Okay, CEO, operations, I don't care. What are you going to be passionate about? So once I started doing that, I realized, sure, one thing I liked about, obviously is the revenue potential for sure. But in general, I like the marketing type of channel. Just to give you guys some perspective, marketing technology, that's what I focused on because of certain criteria that met my definition. May not be your definitions, but it met mine. from there, I said, okay, how can I start breaking in? And this is the hard part, guys. This is probably the really hard part. Is right out of school, you have no experience. You have to prove you're hungry, right? There's probably a lot of talent in your minds to share, but you got to have them listen first. How do you do that? What I did was I just started knocking on doors and I said, okay, these are the companies I want to start going into. This is where I could probably get my foot in, start learning the space a little bit so I could realize, okay, what is my next step? And that's how I started building my career path and what I do. So 25 years later, I founded my own startup as of November 1st. Okay. Prior to that, I was with an enterprise team for a while, leading their teams across the board. I've helped 2 startups, go from 0 to 10 million plus in 2 years' time, et cetera. But it wouldn't get done anything if I didn't have my process in place, guys. So whether you're straight out of school or let's say 20 years later, because I'm all about giving shots to people too. Even on my team, I have people with 0 experience in this space that's been doing something else for decades, but he's hungry to try something new. So I gave him the shot. But he has to build his process, right, guys? He has to make it work. So I guess what my main point is, if you want to break down the barrier, is no matter how long it takes, if you really want it, you can do it. You just got to figure out what you want to be passionate about and just really just grab it by the throat and take it home.
Right. So we know, there are 3 different types of ageism. There's institutional, there's interpersonal, and internalized. And Lisa, you spoke heavily about interpersonal, and Uky spoke heavily about institutional, which I thought was great. So to piggyback off of both of them, I remember, let me see if I can get my story straight here. I did a talk earlier this year, I guess, about interpersonal. So coming from the builder and going out to our client, right? Just quickly going back to Lisa, you mentioned that Netflix has like a 65 and up program. So what I like to think of is I have 4 nieces and nephews. They're all like geniuses from the age, 4. Well, I mean, my 2-year-old nephew before I taught him calculus. But now I have them, they're from like 6 to 15. And I see like some young faces out here. I like to say that, there's that old saying that when you teach, or when you're talking to someone, you're explaining something, explain it as if you're explaining to a child. I say that that's absolute BS these days, because kids are so resourceful and like they have tech at their fingertips and they're understanding it. I like to say, explain it like you're explaining something to your 80, 90-year-old mother, grandmother, neighbor, whomever, because those are kind of like the people who need exactly what you said, the empathy the most. They might not have had that same opportunity to kind of go into tech at the time, and so and tech has to be inclusive. This is something that is relevant for everyone. And then with what Uky said about giving people a chance from an institutional standpoint, discrimination happens at all ages and all shapes and sizes and faces. I remember, 2 years ago, I was talking to someone who was an absolute killer in his field. He was a CIO of his company, and he was, hitting close to 70s. And I kind of pitched something to him that my company was working on from a tech standpoint. And he goes, "Sweetie, that's not the way of the future." So I strongly also believe in giving people a shot. I looked him in the eye and I was thinking, I'm going to buy your company today. Still working on that,
And it's gonna happen.
Absolutely.
But I love that you mentioned giving people a shot.
Yeah.
Now we had one panelist who unfortunately couldn't make it today, and when we were talking, he said something that was so incredible, and I want your perspectives on it, which was that experience doesn't necessarily mean impact. So what do you guys think about that?
You want to start that one?
Sure. I'll keep it brief. All right, check it out. Everyone feels something, obviously, guys and ladies, right? Everyone. I think it actually ties into what I said a little bit ago about what you want to be passionate about. I'm also a firm believer on, it's kind of corny, but also do what's right model, right? There's a lot of shady stuff going in the world, guys, corporate, tech side, all this stuff. It's very easy to get captured into it. So the reason why I touch on this is the experience part is know what you want to share that you know is right. Right? Like, if you're fresh out of school and you've got all these ideas, or you've been decades working on some other stuff, and you got all these ideas, start formatting it out and start building your strategy on how you're going to share those ideas. Right? And be passionate about it, guys. Again, I'm just going to keep on saying that word because you can't fake that. I'm going to tell you that all day long. I give people shots, as, fresh out of school. If they want to get in sales is tough, on that side. But if they want to get in sales, SDR role, I build them a process on how they could ramp up, right? Because that's what it takes, a process. But what I look for though, specifically is not, hey, do they have sales experience? Are they closers? Do they close $1 million deals? No, I don't care anything about that. Is when I talk to them and I ask them certain questions, I listen to their answers on how they actually answer the question, right? Not with just words, but with their heart. Again, corny, but I like to try and read between the lines sometimes because you can't fake that, guys. You really can't.
So for experience versus impact, I think back to some career switchers that I was championing, getting them their first position in tech. They had not had a wealth of experience. Obviously, they had gone through a boot camp type program and a short internship. But once they joined my company, the imposter syndrome was very strong. And so we spent lots of time talking through this. And what I suggested to them was for them to think about ways, obviously they weren't going to produce as much code right away as everybody else. That was sort of frustrating to them because boot camp was very fast paced. And then they started in on their regular job. And he said it felt like going in reverse. But I said, you're not going to produce as much code, but you have a very, very valuable role to play on the team because you're looking at this with fresh eyes. And so you just coming in and asking why a thing has so much impact on the engineers and the team who have been there and who are just sort of like heads down, focused on an outcome and maybe not recognizing what that might mean. And so that new person coming in and asking why or how come or why did we do it this way or tell me how this goes, both gives the more senior people on the team an opportunity to talk through their logic and their reasoning. But in classic, we call this rubber duck debugging in engineering, where you say your problem aloud and you talk through it. And in doing so, you'll either hear the place where you skipped a step, perhaps left something out, glossed over it, or the answer will sort of come to you as you're talking through it. Then you see another path that you can take. And if not, I typically like to use humans as rubber ducks rather than actual rubber ducks because they can give me answers. Sometimes they will have a perspective too. And so having that interplay of somebody who's never seen this code before or never experienced this particular feature with somebody who's been working on it for a long time is vital. And that's how we make sure that the thing that we've built is resilient and logical and pragmatic and it's the right approach. And it doesn't matter how much experience this person has had. Their impact is massive because they've come in and made sure that the thing that we're doing is logical and sound. And so, part of what I do when I'm nurturing senior engineers is to talk to them about their broader impact. Is that force multiplier aspect of what they're working on. So it might not be that they are cranking out twice as much code as somebody else, but if they can help unblock somebody, if they can help move somebody forward, if they can be that rubber duck for somebody, if they can share some experience they've had that helps somebody else grow, that makes a huge impact on the next work that person does. So it has very, broadly applicable meaning, and it doesn't just matter how much time you've spent there, but the way that you can impact both the work that you do and the work that other people do is crucial. And I find that comes from across the age spectrum.
I have a cool little fun fact here. By 2026, workers 65 and older are projected to have the fastest growth in the U.S. labor force. And yet, a 2018 AARP survey found that 3 in 5 workers aged 45 and over have either witnessed age discrimination or experienced it themselves. So Uky, you said something that I absolutely loved in terms of supporting people's passions, but they have to build their own path. In terms of building their own path, what are some best practices, relevant strategies that you can recommend, whether it's metrics for success, building a repeatable process? What do you think?
You'll probably see a common theme, guys, because this is how I am, right? But it is a step-by-step thing for me. So when I look at that, okay, that path that you build for yourself, okay, best practices, and I'm going to say, some common terms like, know your go-to-market strategy, right? Know what your positioning is, all this stuff. But I guess the basic thing is when you know what direction you guys want to go in, you have to find out what resources are going to help you get you there, right? Like for me, I read a lot of great, sales books, right? I did. I'm sure there's a lot of coding books involved here, I've got to assume, right? But, you have to know what resources you need to start accessing, right? Because if you're hungry for it, guys, you're going to want to absorb it. You want to learn it, right? You want to be able to say the right things. And there is best practice all across the board, right? If you dig into it and you actually base it off of the facts saying, okay, this company went from A to Z the right way. Now that definition of the right way, that could be another hour-long session, guys, but there's certain things to look for in a company growth, right? And if you see that type of growth and they're doing the right things, and let's say they have leaders there, right? Whether it's sales leaders or engineering leaders or marketing leaders, I'm willing to bet they're sharing some great content. That's relevant stuff because these guys are actually sharing content that they're using to help their company grow the right way. Now, I will say be careful what type of company process you follow, though, because I think you guys kind of see it. I'm not going to go into too much stuff, but obviously there's an explosion in the tech field right now where there's massive layoffs with these enterprise guys across the board. And that's for a reason, guys. Bottom line. I'm not going to call it out again, but you do certain things, it will catch up to you. But then on the flip side, you see some of these startups that either bootstrapped it or, they got great VC backing, advisors, etc., and they're doing it the right way, and they're doing 100 million plus. That's great revenue. So basically, know who the leaders are, know who the right people to start accessing the right data that's going to get you guys to that next step, the next step, the next step, right? For me, I had to start, okay, what's going to get me to hopefully being able to close a deal, right? Can I actually close a deal with someone, right? Next step after that, how can I lead my sales team that was assigned to me as a manager? Next step after that, how can I lead sales strategy across the board? Next step after that, how can I lead sales and operations across the board? Now, how can I do it for myself? There were so many resources that I had to access, everyone, that got me there too, though. That's my point. Know your resources.
So for me, I give a talk fairly frequently about how to be old in tech, and it's geared for everybody. I self-identify as old, so I'm fairly qualified to speak about this. But there's a few keystone pieces. One of them is learn things. What things should you learn? But what are you interested in? Like Uky said, find your passion, find the thing that you're most interested in and lean in. There's no wrong answer here. So find a thing that you're super interested in and do that. I've had approximately 1 million jobs in my career. And I've been able to take something from every job I've had and leverage that for the next one. So even if it's, I never want to do this thing again, that's an important piece of information to know. So, but keep learning, and embrace that learning mindset. No matter how much time you spend in a profession, if you stop learning, you stop growing. So be resilient, be flexible, be curious, and make an effort to see what's out there on the horizon. Don't just go to ground. And the other thing is meet people, network. I know networking kind of gets a bad rap as a term, but it's very simply going to a space where there are other humans, and that can be physical or virtual, and then talking to those humans. It's not a huge process. And if you're somebody who doesn't enjoy talking to other humans, ask that other human a question, and I guarantee you they will talk. And then you can just kind of stand there and let that wash over you, and you'll get something. Nod every once in a while, make positive noises, and they will continue to talk. Just keep doing that, because you never know where that next connection is going to come from. The people you meet here today or this week, they might remember in 6 months or a year from now that they met you and that you had a particular passion or a particular skill that they're interested in. I've gotten countless jobs because I met somebody at a conference or an event and they remembered that I was looking, or they thought of me when their next opportunity came up. You can't make those connections if you don't put a little effort into it, but it is just a little effort. It's not Herculean. You don't have to spend every day going out and meeting new people. But once you've found a community that you can rely on, that also gives you a network of people that you can turn to when you have situations that you don't know how to handle. Wherever I go, I typically start up a peer network if one doesn't exist, because as you move into management, as you move through your career, you're going to have fewer and fewer peers, but that doesn't mean you have fewer and fewer problems. So finding people that you can relate to and talk to gives you not only that additional perspective, but it gives you sort of a safety net for when things are kind of going sideways. Gives you that really good calibration method. Like, is this weird for me or is it weird for everybody? Because, even just knowing it's weird for everybody makes you feel less weird, right? So learn things, stay curious, and meet people, make connections. And that will keep you going for, even if you want to switch careers, but it'll keep you going throughout your entire career.
Relatability.
Absolutely.
A best practice that I really love is to set expectations around roles and responsibilities. So to talk about relatability, I gave a keynote back in April called Retro is Trending, bringing old school businesses into new age technologies. And what I like to do is kind of compare and contrast the impacts that people make doing their job with and without technology. So from a user perspective, which goes with sales. So, we were looking at an independent business as our client, and we actually found something like a $7 million deficit that was missed because they were still doing things by hand. Wow. And that, that can easily crumble in independent business. So what we need to do is make tech more relatable, more approachable, take away the scary side of things. Do a little bit of hand holding and just, you can absolutely do that through networking and empathy, and showing everyone that, just stick with it, turn this into a passion, and keep going in that direction. Anything else that anyone wants to add? Feedback?
I will say really quick, guys, is just from a relevancy standpoint, right? Because I'm sure you guys are saying, okay, what can I really take back that's going to help me, right? I'm hoping some of the stuff has been insightful, hopefully, right, guys? But bottom line is, when you start looking at it, Lisa made a great point is, and I hate to give them a plug-in, but I do use LinkedIn. I do. I'll give them a plug. Now, with that in mind, the reason I say this is that is one source, for example, where I think more and more, and it's a really great thing to see, is businesses are being driven by people more and more. Right? And that network of people can back you guys up. Like I see it all the time. Again, LinkedIn, but, unfortunately, I touched on it earlier, is there's been like, massive layoffs, all this, crazy stuff. But then people start sharing their experiences and all of a sudden their network has their back. So believe it or not, I am an introvert, guys. No joke. I'm being serious. I force myself to do certain things, but it's because I was hungry for my passion to do certain things. And I decided, okay, one of them is I need to be able to talk to people. I need to be able to network with people. I need to be able to get great ideas from great leaders. So with that in mind, the ABCs, keep it simple. Seriously. Do not overcomplicate your hunger, guys. Keep it simple. Know the process of what you're going to do and build your network of connections that's going to back you up. Should we open up for questions, or Lisa, anything to add?
I was just going to add one more thing. Speaking of LinkedIn,
Look
right? We did, but don't be afraid to reach out to people that you admire or that you feel like could offer you some wisdom. Don't just drop them a line and be like, "Hey, what up?" But like have a question for them, and I think you will find people to be extraordinarily generous with their time. So if you come to them with a targeted ask, like, "Hey, I see that this is your focus and I have a couple of questions. Here are the things that I'm interested in." Give them a little bit about yourself and you will likely reap rewards from that. Finding a mentor can be tricky because you want somebody who is accessible enough to you, but also aspirational enough to give you that. Like, it's cool, Dr. Jill Biden is a great role model, but I can't call her up at the end of a day and be like, "Hey, Dr. Jill, I had this weird thing happen at work today. What do you think?" So finding somebody who, is working, I'm an engineering manager. So finding somebody who's working as a director or a VP of engineering would likely be a better fit for me. But that said, anybody who's working in a profession either that you're in or that you want to be in could potentially be a mentor. And what they're going to do for you is share their experience. You're going to share a little bit about yourself, and you're going to be able to move forward on your path with some of their wisdom at your back. And they can also help you with things like sponsorship. So reach out. If there's somebody that you're interested in, I'm not going to promise that they'll get back to you, but they will, I think, look favorably on a well-formed question and be giving of their time.
Be inquisitive. I love that. Be curious. Seriously, guys. I love it.
Questions?
Do you have any questions?
They're speechless, Lisa.
Got him.
Oh, I have a question. I'm just going to butt right in. So do you
There we go.
know Dr. Jill Biden personally?
I do not.
Oh, I'll bet you she does.
It's a good question. Hello? Hello? Oh, there we go. Okay, yeah. Thank you guys. I think this has been great. All of the advice that you've given has been super valuable, I think, for everyone in the audience, whether they are old, whether they're young, middle-aged, everyone. But I was wondering what you guys think, going back to the topic of discussion, what you think actually the causes of ageism, specifically in tech, are, where it came from, what the problems are that need solving in order for this issue, the ageism for old people, for young, to be no more.
Me or you?
I'll take a stab at it. So I think, there very much like any other bias in tech, and we have a lot. Tech is problematic in a lot of areas. It comes from a perception that the group that you are thinking of doesn't have what it takes. And so I think, especially like for people who are very young, they're like, well, clearly they don't have the understanding of all of these complex systems. For somebody who's been around for a while, like me, oh, they're a dinosaur. Clearly, you know, the last thing they remember was laying HTML out in tables, you know, back in the dark ages. And while I do remember that, what I also remember is all of the modern technologies since then. And I can show you the JavaScript framework adoption and abandonment chart. It looks like the Himalayas every 2 years, something exciting, and then it goes away again. And after a while, you begin to sense a pattern in that. And I hate to be like this because I know everyone's going to have their favorite one, but like at the end of the day, it's a little secret. All the languages are the same. It's really just a matter of syntax. So if you can solve problems with code, you can approach this using whatever language or framework you want. But I think people fail to recognize that if you don't know the latest and greatest thing, that you have a perspective on that. And it's super easy to get into a place where you're like, oh, well, they haven't kept up. They're not going to be useful. And I think that happens in technology more because it is so fast paced, because things do change so rapidly. It doesn't take long. To be considered old in tech, you only need to be 41. Let that sink in. I am more than that, so I will tell you that you can last beyond that. But that's where that shift starts happening for people who perceive you as right around in your 40s. I am not very tall, and I have easily colorable hair, and so people tend to think of me as much younger than I am, and I do not disabuse them of that notion. But also, like, I have you know, a wealth of experience to let me know that I can bring to you something that you know, other people can't. I once got a job that was looking for 3 to 5 years of React experience when React itself was just barely 3 years old. So it was one of those ridiculous job announcements. And I gave them my story and I said, look, do you want somebody who only knows React? Or do you want somebody with a proven track record of language acquisition who can be here when the next great thing happens and pick that up too? And they bought that. So you got to have your stories in place. Get your stories, be able to tell them succinctly. And I think the way we combat ageism is by doing more to be more equitable in both our recruitment and our retention of workers. Recruitment is one thing, and it gets a lot of attention because it's kind of, you know, sexy and you can point at it and there's a lot of numbers with it. Retention is a harder metric. It's more inward facing. You have to kind of examine all of your policies and procedures. So look and see what it is in your company that is making people leave. Ask them, listen during exit interviews, figure out what those problems are and then fix them. And while you might not retain that specific person, you're going to set out a path for retention of more folks going down the road. So it's there's no one single answer, just like there's no one single answer to why do we not have more underrepresented groups of all kinds in technology. But I think, you know, inclusion benefits everyone at every level. So making sure that you are examining all of your policies, that making sure that you're examining all of your hiring practices and doing that repeatedly and paying attention to it and tracking it, because we can't know what we can't track, right? So we got to keep track of that over time, see if we're making any changes or improvements. And if not, continuing to ask why. Otherwise, we just keep doing the same thing over and over again.
I guess I like to add in 2 ways. One, I would recommend not working for biased companies. That's one.
Good one.
The next part, the reason I say this, guys, and I kind of touched on it earlier too, but it's kind of funny. But if you really analyze the code on how to look pretty for VC funding, for example, there's actually a process that you could follow and you could make yourself look really pretty in a very short amount of time. But are they doing the right things? Are they open-minded? Are they cool? Are they innovative? Are they building a talented team of hungry, young, or talented outside the industry people that's just passionate about getting into it? You can read it. You go through an interview. Here's the thing, guys. Yes, you are interviewing with that company, right? You're trying to show them what you got. But don't ever forget the company is being interviewed by you guys too. don't work for biased companies. Ask the right questions, ask the hard questions during the interview process. Don't do the blanket, hey, if they ask you where your challenge is, well, this is ABC. No, don't do that. Ask them the hard questions. If you know the space that you want to go into, if you want to join the right company, okay, that could acknowledge your guys' talent, ask the hard questions during that interview to make sure that you don't join a company that is going to burn in 2 years because they're doing the wrong things either. I always ask hard questions. And if they're not comfortable answering them, well, go back to point one, right?
Hello. My name is Dominique Andrews, and I'm truly engaged here with the whole ageism in tech, because being over 50 in tech, I like the approach that you're talking about, is that you're bringing diversity to it, meaning that I would tell you I have a different resume depending on
Yes,
where I was, with the story that I wanted to tell.
absolutely.
And one of the things too that I'm loving that I'm hearing as well is that when you're just looking at it from one single angle, meaning that young and not that age of wealth of information, that you're losing insight into truly dissecting the problem. Because sometimes they're only looking at, this is just, oh, these are the facts. And we started this concept of thinking through the box, how sometimes people think, oh, let me throw the legacy system out the door. But there's a reason that legacy system is there. And I like everything that we're hearing here. And I truly would love to connect with you related to some of the ageism in tech and those that we're talking here.
Yes,
This is
please.
beautiful. So thank you again
Thank
for
you.
everything.
Thank you.
1 minute and 56 seconds.
So much pressure. Uky, I love what you said about asking the hard questions. That's my big advice. Remember that you're interviewing them.
And Dom's statement, ageism can certainly hurt the industry and any business. To piggyback off of Uky, any business, especially the ones who are a little biased, the basis of the industry is economics, and to not include someone is to miss out on a huge demographic.
So I have a question. This is a technology conference. So can you tell me, in your mind, what type of technology can we use, can we leverage to help people connect to each other, talk to each other, understand each other, reduce the chaos, reduce the disputes, reduce misunderstanding?
So just to clarify some of the ways people could build their network, is that it, like connect and share ideas and stuff with
Yes.
tech?
Yeah.
I could throw some out there just so you guys know, right?
Mhm.
Again, I'm not going to plug in too many people. I hate doing it, but this is standard tools out there.
Yeah.
If you use, I said LinkedIn already, but there's Slack, for example, Teams, right? Those Slack, for example, has many channels that you could join across different topics, across tech, across the board, whether it's AI, coding, sales strategies. That's another example. Thank you, LinkedIn and Slack, right? So,
So,
but there is things like that for sure.
so the question is that, whatever the Slack or LinkedIn or whatever, is it scalable globally? To every country, to everyone?
I think that's a great question. I know I'm personally part of a Slack that is global. I think we're now more than 250,000 members. And there are true, genuine global connections going on. One of my dearest friends on that Slack just moved to Portugal to become a fractional CTO for 3 different companies. And that was sort of a central nexus for him. And he found he found all those opportunities in this Slack that we're a part of, and made those connections, and then moved his entire family with 4 kids to Portugal this summer. Exactly.
Yeah.
So so that's a more formal Slack, but I also have a friend Slack. We've got probably 100, 150 people, also global. One of my friends from Atlanta just landed in Australia yesterday to visit one of my other friends that lives there. So we all met through this one central tool, and we chat and hang out together all day and form a sense of community. And the first time I was meeting them in person, my cousin, I was staying with him when I did it. He was like, well, you don't know any of these people. And I was like, no, but they're my friends. And he said, but you don't know them. And I was like, yes, I do. We spend all day together. And after the first day, he asked me what was different. And I was like, we got to eat dinner together. That was it. We do this, the same thing we do every day, except we were sitting across the table from one another. You can build community no matter where you are. And I think we have the building blocks of those tools. But I think your question is a good one. How do we make that sustainable? How do we make it accessible for everybody? Because I'm in these few Slacks and that's great, but there's, the discovery of those is difficult, which I think is like the Mastodon problem. Like which instance do you join? How do you know which one that's going to be? If Twitter implodes tomorrow, where do you go? There's no great question. There's no great answer for that right now. So I think that's definitely a place where I could see us, that's a place that's ripe for innovation. Somebody find me something.
There's a platform that I personally use, which is, absolutely worldwide, which is Discord. And I want to mention Discord.
Absolutely. Discord.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Started with video games, and I made some excellent friends over in Amsterdam. Not going to go into those stories.
Can I ask
You can
you,
definitely say.
which video game do you play?
Okay, so I'm going to embarrass myself for a second. I recently was working on Elden Ring, but I got very frustrated and it was difficult and I kind of quit. But
You guys still have time to play video games. Oh, man.
I don't have time for video games. So.
If I started playing, my wife gives me the look. So.
But Discord is also just a worldwide platform.
Yeah.
It's accessible, and I think that's also a breeding ground for innovation, because you kind of take out that professionalism that teams kind of have, that stigma. You can just kind of relax into yourself and
I will say there's been a lot of collaboration software that's coming out. I just can't deny it because it is starting to be a global community, guys, right? I'm going to manage teams that's in EMEA, for example, So, when you look at that, technology is key. And I think, it changes every year now. I'm sure one of you guys are going to come out with some great, expletive, stuff and then and
Yeah.
rock and roll, take it to town.
We're counting on it, actually. So.
I think we're at time, guys. This was great. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Just really quick, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question, please hold the mic up and raise the volume of your voice. If you whisper, you won't be heard. Okay, you're online, live everywhere. So just speak into the mic.
And as a reminder, we're all on LinkedIn.
Keep an eye out.